Okay, let's do it. Hi, buddy. I'm Matt.
And I'm Steve.
And this is Marvel Reread Club. Hello, Steve. How are you?
I'm doing all right, thank you. We just retrieved my daughter from college this weekend. Exciting indeed. Unfortunately, the car that we drove up there got bumped into by a moving van as we were moving her out of college. So
someone else came to move their kid out of college with a bit more force than you did in every sense of the word. Actually brought a moving van, whereas you just brought a car.
It was actually a company that was contracted to come in and repaint the dorm rooms after things were done. This person pulled in front of us and tore up our front bumper.
Are you guys on the hook?
I don't think so, but that's part of what I was supposed to be doing today is figuring that out. But I've hit a couple of dead ends so far. But that night we then went out to see the current production of Gypsy starring Audra McDonald.
Oh, fun.
Have you seen that version?
I have not. I saw it 20 years ago with Bernadette Peters, I want to say, and that was a great production, but I have not seen the Audra McDonald. It is supposed to be excellent. How was it?
It was good. My understanding is that it's usually not that dark. This one is pretty dark. It's just pretty clear to my reading that Mama Rose keeps having these mental health incidents along the way. But yes, it was very good. It was just a lot darker than I was expecting.
Okay, yeah. Love that musical. Seen the movie, seen it on Broadway, but I still, to this day, whenever I hear Everything's Coming Up Roses, I don't think of Gypsy. I think of Airplane, where
Ethel Merman is singing.
Ethel Merman is, it's like he's in the VA hospital, and it's like, yeah, one of the soldiers here had it real bad. He thinks he's Ethel Merman, and it cuts to actually Ethel Merman in a hospital bed singing, "You'll be swell, you'll be great, gonna have the whole world on a plate," and then they're like forcibly sedating the soldier as Ethel Merman sings, "Everything's coming up roses," and then finally passes out unconscious.
Okay, so anyway, that's what's been going on with me. What's been going on with you?
Oh, nothing much. We've been having a fine old time. Jack had a soccer tournament over the course of Memorial Day weekend, so we had to drive out to Schaumburg 3 different times, which is not close to Evanston, Illinois, where I live. But we have been doing well. Both kids are about to graduate from their schools. They're about to move on from elementary school and middle school onto middle school and high school, which is all very exciting.
Big milestones.
Yes. Anything else to catch up on, or should we jump into the books of December 1967?
Yes, let's jump into the books of December 1967. Why don't we?
Okay. Now, I have something to admit. You were talking about how dark Gypsy was. I had dark thoughts myself for the first time in the entire history of doing this podcast. I thought about for the first time, I am not enjoying this comic. I might just lie to Steve and claim I read it when I didn't, and then ask him to cover it and just be done. And that was X-Men. But I eventually did read it, and now I'm ready to cover it. So I have no opinion as to who does what books today.
Let me start with Spider-Man. I think you did Spider-Man last time.
Yeah, why don't you go ahead and start with Spider-Man and blessedly save me from doing X-Men as well. All right.
Okay. Spider-Man starts out with a cover that is an extreme tight close-up on Doc Ock's face with 2 separate reflections of Spider-Man in the 2 different goggles. Looks like it was clearly drawn once and then photostatted and placed in both goggles here.
And this is a cover that has been homaged many times, or borrowed from, or stolen from, or homaged, or however you want to say it, many times. I think this is the first one of many, many different covers where we see a close-up on somebody's glasses and a double image of the person they're fighting in the glasses.
So, Doc Ock wins. Produced by Stan the Man Lee and John Ring-a-Ding Romita. Inking Mickey DeMeo, as we always point out, that is Mike Esposito. Lettering Sam Rosen. Spider-Man is on a rampage to try and find Doc Ock after Doc Ock destroyed the house that May is living in. He is finding the various master planner goons and trying to get the Doc Ock information out of him. Ock finally gets onto a two-way TV circuit thing and is taunting Spider-Man about "you'll never find me."
So always big pet peeve of mine when you're looking at someone on a TV and you're looking at the TV from the side. Do you draw the person as if you're looking at that person from the side? And here Ramita does. Ramita draws whatever angle we're looking at the TV, that's the angle we're looking at the person's head.
It looks like he makes an effort to make it look flatter, but yeah, he doesn't quite succeed.
Yeah.
It looks like you're looking at a flat image from the side. Spider-Man ends up going by the Master Planner's original HQ, which was, of course, underwater, and there's a really nice panel on page 3 of him looking into the water down into where this thing was. Meanwhile, the Army, well, actually, I guess it's the Air Force, right? Anyway, one way or the other, the military, led by John Jameson, JJ's son, is saying, okay, well, Doc Ock is out for this weapon. It's too dangerous to keep out where we've got it now, which is apparently just in some office building in New York. We are going to take it to Tony Stark's factory because apparently that is very well guarded. And somebody's like, are we protecting it from Spider-Man as well as Dr. Octopus? And John Jameson is like, sure, I guess, but that's not, that's not a thing. I don't get the whole thing. One way or the other, we're going to protect it. We're going to get it over there. Then we see somebody in the background thinking, speak clearly, you fool. I don't want to miss a thing. And he says that he's there, or he thinks that he's there under false credentials, and he's actually a spy for Dr. Octopus. Peter Parker, meanwhile, goes back to visit Aunt May, who is sort of convalescing at home. And one thing that I realized later that might explain some of my confusion 2 episodes ago when we looked at the previous issue is I was saying that that didn't look like Aunt May's house, that I usually thought of Aunt May's house as looking more like a detached, clapboard, single-family home. And this looked more like a brick building that might have been attached to other homes. I think, didn't Aunt May move into Mrs. Watson's home?
Oh, is that what happened? Okay.
But then I don't understand what room is being rented out. Maybe that's in Aunt May's old house is being rented out. And
maybe.
It's a little confusing, but it might sort of explain some of it. But then, one thing I've been looking for in John Romita comics ever since I saw a comment from somebody on Facebook. Well, let me just put it this way. Page 5, panel 5. Look at Mrs. Watson in the background of that panel.
Yeah.
I have been looking more and more for John Romita's influences on Love and Rockets artist Jaime Hernandez.
Huh.
Is it just me, or is Mrs. Watson right there, right out of a Love and Rockets comic?
Yeah, I've not read much Love and Rockets comics, but from what I've seen, I can see what you're saying.
Mary Jane is showing off the big hole in the wall. Of course, Pete has already seen it. And then Gwen shows up, apropos of nothing, and we get a little bit of the Archie nonsense that we usually get, which is very, well, I say nonsense, entertaining nonsense. Let me put it that way.
Yeah, it's interesting that, we've seen Harry Osborn sort of souring on Peter. Looks like Peter is sort of souring on Mary Jane a little bit. Mary Jane pops in, and Peter thinks, boy, she's all I need right now, which is not a very nice way of thinking of Mary Jane. I thought he was still sort of over the moon about Mary Jane. And then Gwen comes in, and he's much more excited about Gwen. I think he's officially shifting his allegiance from Mary Jane to Gwen here.
Well, I think Mary Jane is very bubbly, high energy kind of girl, and right now he's just a little bit more weighted down with things, and that she's just not his speed, at least at the moment, is the way I take it. Anyway, one way or the other, the spy gets the information to Doc Ock. He apparently has some kind of little two-way TV communicator that's hidden behind some books, which looks kind of neat, but it's not really explained why or how this guy would have this in this building. We see that the nullifier is being taken across town. We also see that Doc Ock has a truck that he's going to be using as part of an ambush. We see the ambush take place, and there's some just really nice panels throughout the rest of this issue. Page 8, final panel on that page. Yeah, Doc Ock's arms are pushing a manhole cover out of the way, coming out of the manhole and sneaking up behind a military guard there. And it's just a really, really effective panel. Next page as well, page 9, panel 3, where Doc Ock is standing on top of it says a U.S. Air Force car, and all 4 of his arms are demolishing the car as he stands on top of it. Again, just really fantastic action sequences throughout this.
This book is kind of looking forward to the Spider-Man 2 movie with Alfred Molina, with the arms, like, being sinister and almost having minds of their own. This is just a really sort of sinister sequence. I love it.
Right, and very cinematic. And I was definitely thinking about the influence this had on the Alfred Molina version here, just in terms of the actual action of how the arms work.
Yeah.
J. Jonah Jameson is really excited that this is going on because he's just sure that Spider-Man is behind it, and this is going to be the time he's finally going to get him for it. Once Peter Parker, there to take photos, calls his apartment. Of course, Harry Osborn picks up because back in the 60s, there was just one single telephone in the apartment, and if it was ringing, you got up and answered it. So he then says, "For crying out loud, mister, it's 3 o'clock in the morning. No, Peter Parker's not here. I don't know where he is, and I couldn't care less. Good night." And hangs up. Yeah. So yeah, Spider-Man shows up, sees what's going on, and then he actually susses out that Doc Ock is going to head to Stark Industries. This is a little bit of an odd turn because earlier they stated that they were taking this to Stark Industries, and then the thing was stolen on its way to Stark Industries, and yet Doc Ock decides to take it to Stark Industries anyway to test it. So it almost seems like wouldn't he have just waited until it was at Stark Industries to take this thing? Would there be some other way of doing this? I'm not sure.
But I guess then they would know where it is. Whereas if he takes it mid-transport, then the last thing they would suspect is that he would actually take it where it was originally going to go. But it's interesting that Spider-Man figures it out. Spider-Man, at this point, has fought Doc Ock enough where he's like, I know how Doc Ock's thinking. I know what he would plan to do in this situation. And he figures it out, which I thought was interesting sort of development in their relationship.
Yes. So and what is this weapon called? I wanted to call it the ultimate nullifier, but I know that's wrong. It's something like
just
that.
Just the nullifier. The nullifier, not the ultimate nullifier.
Right. But big difference. It's not just like Tylenol versus extra strength Tylenol. This is a huge difference between these two different kinds of nullifiers.
Yes.
Doc Ock shows up. Apparently this thing can basically just neutralize any mechanical thing of any complexity. Anything from a simple handgun to high-tech machinery. So he is pointing it at all of the folks at Stark Industries and disabling everything. We see a fantastic maniacal laugh on page 14, panel 4, where he just says, "I am supreme, supreme," and then a little more ranting, and finally, "The world is mine," which, okay, you do have a pretty powerful weapon there, and so I'll give you some of that at least.
It's odd, of course, to go to Tony Stark's factory and not have Iron Man be involved in this story. Indeed. And frequently, if you do something like this and it's not involved, they have a little note going, of course, the superhero is not around because he's off, on the other side of the world fighting the Mandarin or something like that. But here, Tony Stark is at his factory in his own book. And it explains here the reason why Iron Man is not going to be involved in the story is that Iron Man is in a completely different part of this factory and therefore can't get involved. It's an odd little note.
That is. I missed that somehow. Anyway, Spider-Man shows up. He and Doc Ock have just a spectacular fight scene that goes on for many pages. Spider-Man ties 2 of Ock's arms in a knot at one point. And once again, just very cinematic in the way that these arms are used in the fight scene. Eventually, Doc Ock turns the nullifier on Spider-Man, and he's just... Well, at first I was thinking, he's going to do it to his web shooters, and then his web shooters won't work. But apparently it somehow affects Spider-Man's brain because of the radioactive spider or something like that. And he's kind of zonked, and then he has no memory of who he is or what he is. And Doc Ock says, well, no need to worry, friend. You merely had a little accident. It happened while you were helping me commit the crime of the century. The reason for your costume is you're an arch criminal in the service of Dr. Octopus. And Spider-Man says, I can't remember, but I must believe you. I've no other choice. Next, Day of Disaster.
Yes.
Quite an exciting and well-executed story here, in my personal opinion. How about you?
Well, I just don't like amnesia. I just don't like it. It's such a tired trope. Even at the time, even in 1967, this was a tired trope. And hoo boy, it is all the more tired these days. I was very disappointed in the final page of this issue. But up until then, I thought this issue was great. It was just an excuse to have lots of cinematic action between Dr. Octopus and Spider-Man. They fight each other great. The little glimpses we get of the personal life are good. And everything is good in this issue except for the last page. I say in my notes, Romita does a great job with action-packed issue, though Lee relies on tired trope. Then at the end, there's a letter from a citizen of South Vietnam writing from Saigon. That was very interesting, where he talks about trying to acquire some comics. And then usually, of course, when people write to them going like, send me free comics, they'll go like, I'm sorry, we don't do that. But in this case, they're like, yes, we'll do that.
Indeed. Okay, so I believe that is it for that one. Do we want to move on to Daredevil here, which, you get to take this masterpiece of comic book literature.
Yes, I went ahead and warned you 2 episodes ago of this podcast that this issue would have the Trapster. We had just done a 2-parter where he fought the Beetle, who was a villain that came from old Strange Tales Human Torch comics. And then they're like, that worked out so well. Let's do another villain from Strange Tales Human Torch comics, specifically the dumbest villain from that comic, who was called Paste Pot Pete at the time, a guy who walked around with a big bucket of paste that he would then shoot people out of a gun. Well, now he's just slightly cooler. He's no longer called Paste Pot Pete. He's now called the Trapster, but he is still tremendously lame. We jump right into the action where Matt and Foggy are hanging out in their law office when suddenly the Trapster comes smashing through the window. He says, you'll recognize me. I am indeed flattered. I don't know why I'm giving him an Eastern European accent.
Yeah, I'm not sure either.
Do it normal one. You recognize me. I am indeed flattered, he says.
Can you do the credits?
Oh, okay. Hang in there, action lovers. Stan the Man Lee and Gene the Dean Colon did this one just for you. Inked by John Tartaglione, lettered by A. Simek. Now, let's move. The Trapster goes ahead and uses his paste gun to attach Foggy and Karen to their desks. He then asks Matt Murdock. He turns out he's shown up here to get law advice, trying to figure out a way for him to get away with killing Daredevil. Because it's made clear that he still considers the Fantastic Four to be his main villains, but he can't beat them, and it's affecting his self-esteem. And so he's on a little self-esteem kick where he is going to try to build up his self-affirmation a little bit by killing Daredevil first. And that'll make him feel better about killing the Fantastic Four.
Well, and I think also give him some cred with the rest of the Frightful Four.
Yes.
He says that that's what he's there for, and I just thought that was just the dumbest thing. And he's just like, I just looked you up in the yellow pages. I just need legal advice. But he makes it clear once he departs that he knew that they had some connection to Daredevil and that they would be telling Daredevil about this and flushing him out.
Yes. Foggy and Karen figure out to get some nail polish remover out of her drawer to help themselves get free, which is sort of clever and fun. But they did feel the need to point out, lucky he used a weak paste mixture. A case where Stan Lee was somewhat unconvinced by Gene Colan's storytelling here. And it's like, would that work using nail polish remover to remove yourself from Paste Pot Pete's super paste? Maybe not. Maybe we'll have to explain. He, for some reason, used a weak paste mixture.
Well, and also notice that Karen is clearly trying to get the stuff out of her hair through some of the panels in page 4. And then in that final panel, clearly her hair has been done again.
Yes, quite spectacular. We see Paste Pot Pete flying away. He has got a bizarre sort of flying leaf-shaped thing that he has.
It's just weird.
As you pointed out, he does think that, they know Daredevil here, which is not a good thing for your law firm to be known that this is a place for supervillains to attack. As Foggy says, I'm going to take our name out of the yellow pages. Foggy and Karen get upset with Matt. I guess they're like, yeah, why don't you warn Mike, since we all know Mike's really Daredevil? And he's like, I don't have Mike's phone number or address. And they're like, isn't that weird? It's like Karen doesn't believe him. Says, Matt Murdock, we all know you visited Mike before. You must know his address. How can you be so unconcerned about your brother? And he just says, Mike can take care of himself, Karen. She says, yes, no thanks to you. And so then Foggy and Karen leave in disgust. He thinks to himself, I'm afraid I outsmarted myself when I took on a third identity, that of my twin brother Mike. I never dreamed it would lead to such embarrassing complications. Oh, really, Matt? You never dreamed? Because I dreamed it. I knew this would lead to embarrassing complications. For instance, the fact that you've never been seen together at the same time. he goes ahead and goes swinging around looking for the Trapster, finds the Trapster on his bizarre sort of flying leaf. At least it sort of makes sense that the Trapster would have access to all this fancy stuff because we know he's friends with the wizard. They went ahead and get a big fight. Eventually, the Trapster attaches the wizard's anti-gravity disc to Daredevil and sends him flying up into the stratosphere, never to be seen again, which is, I guess, kind of clever.
Yeah.
And, a believable enough death trap. We see that the Trapster is living in one of the wizard's hideouts, which is yet another abandoned castle on the outskirts of New York City. Then we see the Trapster at this point decide, okay, I have killed Daredevil. I have raised my self-esteem. Therefore, I now have the self-affirmation I need to go ahead and kill the Fantastic Four. He dresses himself up as Daredevil, which is a little bit strange because not necessarily the Fantastic Four's closest buddy. But he decides, well, I know Daredevil's not going to show up because I know he's dead. So I'll go ahead and dress myself up as Daredevil, go to the Fantastic Four. There is Sue Richards. He walks in the room, takes out his paste gun, and starts shooting at her, and then leaves a bomb there to go off as soon as someone else enters the room, assuming it's going to be a member of the Fantastic Four. Meanwhile, Daredevil has gotten himself free and has, of course, fallen to the street and saved himself through the help of a flagpole. There are always lots of flagpoles in New York City. And then he's going to go to the Baxter building and check in on Sue, not realizing that him being in the room will set off the bomb. And that is the cliffhanger that we leave things on. As I say in my notes, issue not as bad as it could be. Trapster almost works. : would not be bad if not for John Tartaglione. Although you pointed out a panel on page 17 where Sue is suddenly whirling around as Daredevil comes in the room. And it is one of the most bizarre, twisty, turny panels you're ever going to see.
Yeah, I think my comment was that it looks like she's been taking stretching lessons from Reed.
Yeah.
I mean, it also looks a little bit like somebody's trying to execute a Neil Adams type panel, but didn't quite pull it off right.
Yes.
But of course, Neil Adams working at DC yet at this point? Was Deadman going on?
I think
Okay.
Deadman was going on at this point. Yeah.
Okay, so just a few things. One, page 9, the big splash page. Once again, which pages does Gene Colan choose to do as a splash page? Page 9, as Daredevil jumps downward onto Place Pot Pete. The Trapster. Downward from where? Not clear. But the city below, is it just me or does that look like Chicago, not New York?
Yes, that is very clearly Chicago. That is how there are no bridges like that in New York, but there's lots of bridges like that in Chicago. And the river sort of wending its way in between tall buildings. That is 100% Chicago. As someone who has lived in New York and Chicago, I can tell you that is Chicago.
Yes. But yeah, John Tartaglione is doing Colan no favors with some of this stuff here. I mean, just look at that building that's directly behind Daredevil's face and right arm. Look at the directions the windows are going and how it meets the ground.
Yeah, that's I think the mole man has been attacking here.
Yes, that would that might explain it. At one point when Trapster is fighting Daredevil, Trapster says, "What? You dare mention that useless stick, the Billy Club, to someone who possesses an unbeatable paste gun?" Which, Trapster, come on. You'll always be Paste Pot Pete in your heart. Just admit it.
And also, everyone who has ever faced you has defeated your paste gun. Never once have you ever defeated any superhero with your paste gun.
Yes. Sue, I thought that this book was miscolored until I got to Fantastic Four and found out that no, indeed, everyone's doing this way. They seem to have decided that Sue is wearing blue leggings under her blue mini dress.
Yeah.
Which just seems a little odd. Okay, that's not what you designed originally, but okay. And then Sue is very worried as she's laying on the floor that this bomb's going to go off, and there's nothing she can do. It's like, you've got a force field. You can just put it in a force field bubble.
Yep.
Which I'm guessing that's what's going to happen next issue, but they just want to try to make it sound more perilous than it is. Anyway, that's all I have to say for this. I think we can mercifully move on to the next issue here.
Yeah, why the constant Strange Tales villains? I don't know. Okay, let's go ahead and move on to The Mighty Thor, number 147, The Wrath of Odin. And we have a surprisingly jacked-looking Loki trying to beat the crap out of Thor on the cover, while Odin is watching the whole thing as if he is the Macho Man Randy Savage, who has just snapped into a Slim Jim.
Yeah, that's one interesting way of putting it, and not entirely inaccurate. Okay.
It's not at all clear from the drawing who Odin is cheering on here. I think he's just stoked to get to see a battle, even if it is his two sons, and he presumably does not want either of them to win. Okay, let's go ahead and jump inside this issue. The Wrath of Odin.
Isn't this my issue?
Oh, is it? Oh, hey, there you go.
Okay. So when last we left off, Thor had been hypnotized into helping the Circus of Crime steal a several ton bull sculpture made out of gold, but then he was just snapped out of his hypnotic stupor and is now trying to figure out what's going on as he's being shot at by the police. Another smashing super spectacular by Stan the Man Lee and Jack King Kirby, embellishment Vince Colletta as always, lettering Artie Simek. Sorry, the as always was my own editorial comment.
So I gotta say, I find Colletta's inking on this entire issue to be shockingly good. Right, starting here on the first page, even the hatching on Thor's elbow, I don't mind. There were several times when reading this comic where I'm like, this was Colletta, wasn't it? This isn't Bill Everett. So that is the ultimate compliment I can pay a Vince Colletta comic. There were times I had a hard time believing it was Colletta.
Well, Mike Collins in our previous episodes pointed out that Vince Colletta rarely uses a brush. And so there were some pages where he's like, I don't think this is Colletta at all. He's using a lot of brush in this issue.
Yeah.
And, once again, is that because he just decided to go ahead and be a little bit more adventurous with his tools and, take a little more time? Or does it mean that he has a new assistant who is really putting in his all? Who knows? You can never figure these things out in retrospect. So Thor puts the golden bull back. The cops are like, well, hey, now that you're cooperating and you put the thing back, that'll at least work in your favor when you're sentenced. Princess Python seems to suddenly be like, oh no, he's innocent. Please don't hurt him. We were the bad guys, and sort of seems to be having a change of heart. It then seems that she was just trying to distract the cops so that her Python could come and rescue her. Although we do see on the next page that she does seem to feel a little bit bad about leaving Thor there to take the rap. I do have to say I love the top panel of page 4, where the Circus of Crime is making their getaway and their circus tractor trailer with the Gambonos kind of holding on to the edge or jumping in or something. The Python is sticking out the window, basically hissing back at the cops.
Seemingly whipping around in the wind. Given how crammed they are inside this truck, I don't think there is any member of the Circus of Crime who feels the same way about pythons that I do. I think they have all made their peace with this python and are not at all scared of it.
Yes. Well, and fortunately, this is a very low-profile vehicle, so they will be able to make their escape and not be found.
Yes.
The tractor trailer is covered in stars and then has a massive crane sticking out of it that presumably was going to take the bull. Thor is like, look, I'm trying to tell you what's going on. You don't believe me. I understand that. Okay, fine. I will go to jail as much as it pains me. And yes, I will turn over Mjolnir because Mjolnir does not deserve to be in jail. I mean, that's basically what he says, right? It says, it ill becomes the once enchanted Mjolnir to share a prison cell with its hapless master. So I deserve to go to jail, but not Mjolnir, man. Not Mjolnir. So we see Loki, who is banished in one of the weirdest looking cosmic magic places that I've ever laid eyes on. Yep. Page 5 is a huge splash of tiny Loki with, are those supposed to be like roots or branches of the world tree, maybe?
Maybe.
That's the only thing that really would make any narrative sense in terms of what this is, other than just crazy psychedelic weirdness. And there are these weird magic-looking birds of prey or sort of monstrous-looking things that are flying around. Lots of Kirby crackle in the background. Anyway, suddenly he feels himself being pulled back to Asgard, and there's Odin. And Odin's like, yeah, you know what? I know you're terrible, but I'll take you out of timeout. So it's not really clear why this is. It almost seems to be like I can only have one son imprisoned at any given time.
Yeah.
My other one's in jail. So if I have both my kids in jail, it really says something bad about me as a parent. So I'm going to go.
Seems like he's banished one of his children to sit in the corner and then set an egg timer. And then after however long, in this case, several months, the egg timer goes off and he's like, okay, your punishment's over.
Yeah, pretty much. Well, maybe like Carla in Cheers, he wants to be able to say that not one of his kids has ever had a conviction that stood up under appeal.
Right.
So Sif and Balder happen in at the same moment. They're like, oh, it's evil Loki. We will help you defeat him. And Odin's like, I am the wrath of Odin, and none may challenge my word. I have spoken, yada, yada, yada. So they're like, this seems like a really bad idea. I think Loki's going to go do evil Loki stuff. And Loki's like, no, I totally won't. It's you can trust me. It's all going to be good. I'm totally going to do some evil Loki stuff. And then, he transports himself to Earth. And there's a funny little sequence with a couple of homeless dudes in an alley. And one of them is complaining about all the hippies. Essentially, he's saying to himself, with all the dropouts in town these days, there ain't no more dignity in being a bum.
Yeah.
So it's basically like, now people are going to think we're hippies. What? How degrading is that? Loki happens to show up in that alleyway and they go scattering.
And they go, look, it's Loki in an alleyway in New York City where there are no alleyways. What is going on? He must be magic.
Yes, I just always assume that these are abandoned lots.
Yeah.
So Thor, meanwhile, is in jail. His cellmate is starting a fight with him, but then Thor is bailed out by a mysterious-looking, handsome man in a suit and sunglasses. And it's like, well, maybe not handsome, but a mysterious, dapper-looking man, I guess. Elegant-looking man. And didn't we have a sequence like this, like, several years ago with, was it Loki bailing somebody out for some kind of purposes? I don't know. It seems
like that. Yeah.
Seems very reminiscent of something from the past. Thor very quickly figures out, oh, you're my brother. It actually took him a little longer to figure that out than really should have. It's like,
keep in mind, these two have been brothers for literally thousands of years. So,
yes.
like, oh, you're my brother who I've been hanging out with for over 1,000 years. I recognize, at first I'd recognize you because he had sunglasses on. But then I go, wait just a second. And he rips the sunglasses off him. It's like, you are Loki. Like, can you imagine the two of us? Like, we've only been brothers for 50 years. But I think that if one of us was wearing sunglasses around the other, we wouldn't actually need to rip the sunglasses off to know who the other one is.
Yes, I agree. So there's a big knockdown, drag-out fight between Thor and Loki. Loki is pointing out that, yes, Thor usually could defeat Loki pretty handily, but now that all he has is his super strength, well, Loki also has Asgardian levels of strength, but he's also got his various magical powers, and he's just about to finally dispatch with Thor once and for all when Balder and Sif show up in defiance of Odin's word to come and defend Thor, and then we just see Odin back on Asgard and says, no matter their motives, my punishment must be swift and terrible, and by the power of yon bolt I hurl, so shall it be. And then we see a huge energy bolt going towards the earth right near the eastern US. It says, next, let there be chaos. And the word chaos is full Artie Simek.
Yes.
Let's see. Is there anything that I missed from my notes? No, I don't think so. I think I covered just about everything I had in my notes. So what do you think?
I think that this is a great issue. I do find, as I mentioned at the beginning, Loki to be surprisingly buff in this issue. He's not usually as buff. He's not usually as capable of beating up Thor. They had made it very clear in the last couple of issues that Thor had had a lot of his magic abilities taken from him, but he did still have all of his strength. We just saw him carry this huge golden bull out of this museum. He was seen as having all his strength, but then Loki shows up like, oh, I can beat you up now. It's like, no, you can't. He's got all the strength he used to have. But I guess the idea is that Loki can bolster his strength using magic and Thor cannot.
Yes.
Odin's face on the second panel of page 7 is definitely one of the places where I'm like, wait just a second, who's thinking this? Like, that can't possibly be Coletta. It's absolutely gorgeous face of Odin on page 7. His eyes are not just slits gashed into the page. This is really shockingly nice art. Same thing with first panel on page 9 with the bums complaining about the hippies. Really looks like it is not inked by Coletta.
Yeah. Very good point.
I assume it is Coda, but it's just shockingly good art. Coda doing a shockingly good job.
Although I will point out on page 7, panel 2, that one you're saying is inked very well. Unfortunately, we do have some early appearances of Kirby sausage fingers going on as Odin holds the scepter towards us there.
Yeah. Sif and Balder are really attached at the hip at this point. We haven't seen them out of each other's presence in about a year's worth of comics. We know that Balder is secretly developing feelings for Sif, even though Sif is still in love with Thor. So we've got a little love triangle going on here. But if Thor was aware of this at all, he would be getting pretty jealous at this point because these two are attached at the hip. I just going through my notes. I say in my notes, brought home and forgiven for no reason. And no reason is all in caps.
Yeah. Well, as you said, it's like you just set the egg timer and it goes off and it's like, okay, well, your punishment's done. One last thing that I just realized I did have in my notes I forgot about. I like the dialogue between Thor and his cellmate. Cellmate says, if you're so blame strong, why don't you just punch your way out of here? Thor says, all my life I have defended the law of both Asgard and Earth. Now, though I be sorely grieved, I can do no less. How come they let you keep your fancy duds? I do not know. Something about that I do not know just really jumps out at me as funny for seemingly no reason.
One of many, many places where Stan Lee feels the need to call out that there is something in the art that makes no sense. In this case, why they let him keep his costume, whereas his cellmate is dressed up in prison garb.
Yes, yes. So, shall we move on to the origin of the incomparable Inhumans?
Yes, let's do it.
The reason why. New luster hath been added to living legendary by Stan the Man Lee and Jack King Kirby. All hail ye as well, these names immortal. Joe Sinnott embellisher, Sam Rosen letterer. So once again, we still have Joe Sinnott inking the backup feature here, which is quite nice. We start out with...
Is legendary a word?
No. Well, I mean, this is English. So
why not just legends? Legends is a word. Legendary.
Because legendary sounds more highfalutin and fancy and something like that. Yeah, sure. So we start out with a very, very Kirby panel, as we were talking about in our previous issues, with cavemen and space-age technology coexisting. We see the Sentry, whom we last saw in Fantastic Four, the mid-50s somewhere, if I recall correctly. 64. Okay, so I recalled incorrectly. So we see the Sentry being attacked by some of the Stone Age humans with their bows and arrows. We get to see a fantastic shot of a herd of woolly mammoths and a giant armadillo and all sorts of megafauna that is long since extinct from this earth. And the Sentry is wondering why he has been roused from his sleep after all this time. And then he sees the city of Adelan, thinks, that must be it. So in a really cool sequence, he hovers his way over the water over to Adelan. The people of Adelan are civilized enough to not necessarily assume that this is going to be a hostile attack. But it's like, oh, good. A stranger is coming, and he seems to be someone who might have things like knowledge, so let's welcome him in, which in this case is not entirely incorrect.
Mm-hmm.
So the Sentry shows up and is speaking to them, and they respond, though your tongue is our tongue, your words are meaningless to us. And so this says to the Sentry, okay, so you are the ones who resulted from the experiments of the Kree. Then he's asking about the Terrigen mists. By the way, yesterday you kept on pronouncing it Tarragon like the spice, which I did not call out, but I assume it's Gen like Genesis or generate. Anyway, one way or the other, the leader of the Inhumans at this point in history comes out to attack the Sentry, and it doesn't affect the Sentry in any way, but the Sentry's just like, okay, so you found the Terrigen Mists, you now have great powers, there are no limits to the advancements which humanity can attain, the Kree were correct in their experiments, I will disappear now, but the next time you see the Kree, you might meet as deadly foes, which seems like an odd thing to end on. I'm guessing that we will be seeing them interact as deadly foes, or else they wouldn't be setting that up. And then the Sentry leaves, says next and finally Black Bolt, as we see like some kind of sea serpent in the water that he is skimming over. So, thoughts?
So this is a very strange story. When we did the previous Inhuman backup with Mike Collins, they're like, oh, we're about to do, I'm going to call them Tarragon myths. We're about to do these Tarragon myths, and they're going to explain why we have these Inhuman powers. But they were already clearly much more advanced than the cavemen around them, and it was not explained at all why they were already more advanced than the cavemen around them. And we, the two of us and Mike Collins, were saying, like, isn't it supposed to have something to do with the Kree? Were the Kree supposed to advance them? Why aren't they saying that? Mike even pointed out that there was a letter in the back from someone going, what about the Kree? Are you were going to do anything with them? And they were like, oh, yeah, maybe we will. And we discussed with Mike, like, oh, maybe that's where they got the idea to link all this up. Well, indeed, this entire story is entitled The Reason Why, and it says, now at last, the never before revealed answer. And it seems like a lot of people had my exact same reaction to that last issue, going like, but why? Why are they so advanced? But they feel like they can't then flash further back to show that happen. They have to pick up on the cliffhanger last issue of the Inhuman leader exposing himself to the Terrigen or Tarragon myths, but then they have the Sentry show up. And by the way, this Sentry, a much nicer guy than the last time we saw him. He's like, he shows up and they've got sort of a barrier in his way. And he's like, remove this barrier that I may explain. And they say it shall be done. I would expect the Sentry to just blast through the barrier or insult the barrier in some way.
I can see that, the last time we saw him, he was awakened by invaders into his space, and he was defending this outpost of the Kree. Here, he was awakened in order to go investigate what is going on with the Inhumans the Kree experimented on. And so he gets to them, and he's like, okay, I am here to inspect you. Could you please let me through? It seems to make total sense to me. Although this does sort of, I guess that the citizens of Adelan here are speaking Kree, from what it sounds like.
Like the dialect has changed enough that they can no longer understand each other's words, even though they can tell it's the same language. It's
no. I think they understand each other. I think it's kind of like in, Star Trek The Next Generation, that race that speaks in metaphors where, you understand the words, but the meaning makes no sense. I am Intergalactic Sentry 459. I speak for the Supreme Kree. If you don't know what Kree means and you're not sure what intergalactic means and you don't know, I can see that just being like, I don't understand what you mean.
Now, I do love the art. I love Kirby's art of cavemen, and then even more so his art of prehistoric creatures on page 2 with giant woolly mammoths and various other creatures. He loves drawing that. He loved when the X-Men visited the Savage Land. He loves getting to draw anything like that. So another gorgeous Inhumans backup, wonderful sit-out inks on Kirby. The story seems just out of order. That's my complaint about the story, is that we should have dealt with this element of the story before we dealt with last issue's element of the story. But that's a minor complaint.
Okay.
All right, let's go ahead and do Submariner and the Incredible Hulk, Tales to Astonish, to destroy the Realm Eternal. We begin with the Submariner cover. It's interesting. Submariner is sort of trapped under rubble while a submarine is blowing up a building. And it's all colored blue. And it's sort of like a reminder that, like, oh, by the way, all of these Submariner stories, they would all be blue. This is at the bottom of the ocean. If we were to color these things, honestly, they would all be blue. So the colorist of this cover hasn't got the memo that we aren't doing that. So it's all blue. And I kind of like it. I always like one color covers.
I'm wondering if that's because that skyscraper there does not look like an Atlantean building in any way. So it's almost like, oh, we're going to make this all blue just to make it clear, because the art does not make it clear that we are underwater.
True. We get to this issue, Prince Namor the Submariner, to destroy the Realm Eternal. And once again, it says, perhaps the most overwhelming comicdom classic of all, Smilin' Stan Lee proudly presents a Roy Thomas Werner Roth cataclysmic coup de grace, inked by Dan Adkins, lettered by Artie Simek. And last issue we had Roth and Adkins, and we all three agreed that Adkins was not saving Roth in any way, and the art just looked awful. In this issue, Adkins is saving Roth. And somehow Adkins has reasserted himself. And the art, I thought in this issue, looked 10 times better than last issue, even though it was the same art team. Did you feel that way?
I won't argue with you on it. I mean, I don't know if I'd say 10 times better, but you know, it's
even
okay.
10% better would still be great.
Yes. Okay, I'll grant you 10% better.
All right. So then we begin with Namor has been hanging out with the swamp men and quickly realizes, like, oh, I should actually leave the Savage Land and go protect my homeland from the plunderer. He takes off. I think shockingly good art of him taking off going towards this. Looks more like Adkins and Roth. They make it very clear that the Savage Land is underground, even though we have just seen the sun shining. They say, thus musing, the grim sovereign of the sea enters the long tunnel, which provides the only exit from the Savage Land. Once again, we have yet another case where Roy Thomas feels the need to explain something he finds unusual in the art, where he has to sort of explain, wait, why hasn't the plunderer made it further out into our world yet? And it's like, oh, because he's been lingering over the destroyed Atlantean city that is outside the entrance to the Savage Land to study the building materials, knowing he may encounter those building materials in the new Atlantis as well, and he'll know how to destroy them better, which is a rather odd explanation.
Yep.
And the people on his ship are like, wouldn't they possibly be using new building materials, and this information isn't going to help you at all? And he's like, yeah, you're right. Okay, let's go destroy the new Atlantis.
Yeah, plunderer, more like blunderer, aren't I right?
Are they right?
Yes, yeah, okay.
Indeed. Meanwhile, bizarrely, it wouldn't have been hard to come up with a storyline in which the plunderer forces Namor to swear allegiance to him temporarily or in some way, or Namor is just doing some sort of trick. And it wouldn't have been hard to come up with a way for Vashti and Dorma to have gotten some strong evidence that Namor and Plunderer were working together. Instead, they have just leapt to this conclusion from no evidence whatsoever, but they have completely turned Atlantis against Namor. Namor, meanwhile, stops off in the ruined Atlantean city, visits his mother's grave, and then he is attacked by an orca. So whether or not Namor can speak to and or control fish changes all the time in these comics. And this is one of the most bizarre instances where it's like, okay, clearly he cannot speak to or control fish, and Orca is attacking him, trying to kill him. But then he keeps punching the orca, gets on top of it, and punches it into submission, and then orders it to take him to Atlantis, which is so strange that, like, yeah. Okay, he can't speak to or control fish unless he punches them a bunch of times, and then he can't.
Well, maybe he can speak to him, but he can't control him. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah, but this seems very much like breaking a wild horse. However, I don't think you punch horses to do that.
No.
At least I don't think you do. I don't think that's the right way to do it. Let me put it this way. If anyone is doing it that way, they need to stop.
Yeah, stop that. Namor the Plunderer and the U.S. military all converge on Atlantis.
Another three-way fight.
They are all beating the crap out of each other in various ways. There's a nice little sequence where Namor has to save a little child who is being harmed in the bombing of Atlantis and finds out that Atlantis has turned against him in the meantime. We get a bizarre thing on page 11 in this big three-way fight that is so confusing. The U.S. military is dropping depth charges. It is not shown at all in the art, but Namor says in a speech bubble, "Shockwaves destroying Lord Plunder's ship, overwhelming me." I should mention that Lord Plunder at this point has ditched his main goons to escape in his own little getaway ship because he decides to get while the getting's good. But then we just find out in a speech balloon that his ship has been destroyed, and that's presumably the end of the Plunder storyline. Namor is passed out in the ruins of Atlantis, and then a bunch of Atlantean ships take off for war with the surface world. And that is the end of this issue. What were your thoughts on this issue?
It was okay. I don't think it's much better or worse than some other ones we've had. The Werner Roth art is, I miss when we had Dan Adkins doing both pencils and inks.
Oh, yeah.
That brief period was quite nice. One thing I do like, though, about Werner Roth's pencils, page 3, panel 1. I really like the idea of that floating mass transit train that's floating along in the sky on that panel. Do you see what I'm talking about?
Sorry, this is page 3, panel 1?
Yes.
Yes. I guess that's what that is. It was unclear to me.
Yeah, that's what it looks like it is to me, that, it's just this little floating train that's going along, taking commuters to and from work in Atlantis. Overall, something about Mariner's face with this art team kind of bugs me. It's weird. The colorists seem to be coloring the Plunderer differently to where his pants are now blue rather than white. And as much as I dislike the white that he usually has, that those blue pants somehow just don't improve anything in any way. I don't know. This story's okay. Oh, and at the end, I guess it was not entirely clear that the people who are currently running Atlantis, they don't realize once again that there are two different factions that are fighting here, and they just think that, okay, that's it, the surface world's attacking. We are now officially at war with the surface world as they send off warships.
Yeah, they think that the Plunderer and Namor and the surface world are all working together to war against Atlantis, and they're like, why is everyone picking on us? And they're like, okay, we'll declare war.
Yes.
Let's move on to the back of the book. The Incredible Hulk, the Puppet, and the Power. Stan the Man Lee and Marie the She-Severin have come up with another smash-roo, ably aided by Herb Trimpe, inker, Artie Simek, letterer. So once again, we've got Trimpe inking Severin as opposed to the Severin inking Trimpe, which we will have starting a year from now. And I think it is shockingly good. I've just been loving this combo. You know, Marie Severin, it used to be, was drawing both Doctor Strange and Hulk. And if she was going to leave one of those books, I would have preferred that she left Hulk because I thought she was just doing an amazing job with her visual imagination in Doctor Strange. She gets less of an outlet for her visual imagination here in the Hulk, but she's still doing a good job. It's a shame we had to lose her in Doctor Strange, but at least I'm glad we get to keep seeing her somewhere. We begin with sort of a symbolic splash page of the Lord of the Living Lightning playing Hulk like a marionette. The Lord of the Living Lightning has given the Hulk some coffee, hopefully decaf, and has convinced the Hulk to join him and go attack an army base.
Well, if you're going to send him to attack the army base, then go ahead and give him full calf.
Yeah, exactly. They've still got Glenn Talbot captured. Of course, it's not that hard to get the Hulk to attack an army base. It's something he's done pretty regularly anyway. But I guess that's not really true. I guess army bases are always attacking him, but he doesn't usually attack them.
Yeah. But then also, is this, I guess, probably Air Force, right? Isn't Thunderbolt Ross actually an Air Force general? Or is he Army?
I don't know.
I don't know.
I don't know. He doesn't wear green. So then the Hulk attacks. Thunderbolt Ross is like, oh, okay, Hulk's attacking. We've been preparing for this for years. Let's go ahead and do Plan G for gas, plan to attack him with gas, which is always a good way to attack the Hulk. It works, and they successfully gas the Hulk and knock him out. They're like, yay, we finally succeeded in our whole goal of attacking the Hulk. And then it's like, wait, what? While we've been doing this, it was just a distraction, and the Lord of the Living Lightning has taken over our base? What? But we didn't know that. Now the Lord of the Living Lightning has both the Hulk and Betty hostage and puts them in the same room and says soon the Hulk's going to wake up and attack Betty. And that is the cliffhanger in which we enter an issue. There is sort of reminiscent of a very old Marvel comic at this point, with bad guys putting their feet up on desks. We see General
right,
Ross
the executioner.
Yes, the executioner back in the day. General Ross gets a call from the Lord of the Living Lightning, who has taken over his office in the meantime and is just lounging in his chair and kicking his feet up on the desk.
And smoking his cigars.
I thought this issue was okay. The Living Lightning, obviously very forgettable villains. Still not clear to me if the Living Lightning is the name of their machinery or the name of their terrorist organization or just the name of the leader. It's totally unclear to me. But the general plan of the Hulk attacking a base, and while he's doing so, the terrorists take it over, is a fun idea for a comic, and it is well executed here. Beautifully drawn by Marie Severin, beautifully inked by Herb Trimpe, and the writing is just fine by Stan Lee. Stan Lee is still not letting anybody else touch this book. You know, no other writer has ever touched this book. Stan Lee clearly loves the Hulk.
I don't know whether you're familiar with that old internet meme of, wait, where are you? And it's, I'm in your base, killing your dudes. I don't know. Yeah. Anyway, this is very much, wait, where are you? I'm in your base, killing your dudes right here. Generally, I'm not as happy with the art combo in this issue as you are. I have liked this art combo in the past, but it looks sort of sketchy in a way that is not working for me. But, you know, to each their own.
Yeah. I mean, I guess even in the panel on page 9 where the Living Lightning is putting his feet up on the desk, he looks great, but Talbot and Betty Ross in the background are sort of sketchy.
Yeah. But yeah, there was one weird point where Betty is saying, oh, Bruce, my darling, must it always be like this? Must the Hulk forever stand between you and me? Will things never be the way they once were with us? Were they ever that way with them?
No.
Yeah.
That did strike me as odd. They were never together.
Well, I think there may have been one like, was it at the end of the 6-issue original Hulk series where they seemed to almost have a go off and have a happy ending kind of thing?
I
I don't know.
guess. Yeah.
Maybe, but yeah, it did just jump out at me as like, I don't really remember a time when you actually had it idyllic. It's, but the Living Lightning is kind of lame. Yeah, but they make it clear here that they are an anti-American organization that is trying to destabilize the U.S., and they're thinking that this attack on the army base, if successful, will cause other subversive cells, which don't necessarily seem to be ones directly associated with the Living Lightning, but any other sorts of subversive cells to rise up and join them in overthrowing the U.S. government.
Yes.
Yeah, that's it. I think we should move on.
Oh, I've got good news for you, Steve. You get to do X-Men. Super treat.
Yes, we can have you let us know what your massive problems were, which, I mean, there's any number that they could be. I'm just wondering.
Yes.
You can just tell me what they actually are. X-Men number 39, new costumes, new thrills, the end of the Dread Mutant Master or of the X-Men. Don't miss the fateful finale. And then a question mark, which they've already had an exclamation point. Yes. It's a little bit weird. On the cover, we've got the X-Men in what will be their uniforms going forward here, but it's a very poorly inked cover.
Yes.
Probably very poorly penciled as well. It's not clear to me who is penciling and inking this thing, but it's not great. So, the fateful finale. Stan Lee enthusiastically endorses this Roy Thomas Don Heck excitement-laden epic. Parentheses, we're not sure just what Vince Colletta inker and Artie Simek letterer think of it, though. Close parentheses. So I have said in the past that Don Heck and Vince Colletta actually work towards each other's strengths and against each other's weaknesses, and so they would both have a better reputation if they had worked together more often. This issue is not evidence of that supposition.
I have never agreed with that supposition. However, I have always felt like they should be together just so that they are harming the fewest number of books by putting them together. And I still agree with that. I'm glad that they're together here. But hoo boy, it was hard to read. I mean, just look at the splash page. You know, certainly it looks like no two people have their legs on the same floor, which is always true of anything.
Yeah.
Colletta inks. We've got a passed out Blob who is doing sort of a hip thrust as he is passed out because
right.
His butt is not connecting with the floor. It doesn't look like they're being viewed on two TV screens by the Mutant Master. Nothing works. Nothing works in this entire issue.
So let's try to jump into this to get it over with as quickly as we can. When last we left off, Cyclops and Iceman are somewhere in the southwestern U.S., so apparently not at the same base where the Hulk and Living Lightning are currently doing their thing, but
no.
Some other one. It would have been more interesting if they had all sort of bumped into each other in some way. And then Beast, Marvel Girl, and Angel are all somewhere behind the Iron Curtain, and the Blob is there, and both groups are trying to stop nuclear Armageddon from happening based on some sabotage that the Mutant Master is trying to perpetrate, making each side think the other side has attacked them. So Psyche and Iceman, they're able to freeze the air filtration system, which is where the deadly attack was going to come from. They then are being attacked by some kind of machinery, and they're like, oh man, it looks like they were designed just for us. And then they're like, oh, wait a minute, Mastermind's here. We're just imagining this. This stuff isn't actually here. Let's just go ahead and just concentrate real hard and be like, oh yeah, sure, it's not there.
Well, they never would have figured it out if Mastermind himself had not stepped out and said like, hi, it's me, Mastermind. And they're like, Mastermind, if you're here, that means these things aren't real. And if he had just stayed just right around the corner, they never would have guessed.
So Marvel Girl and Beast have been imprisoned by whatever Eastern European country this is as the generals try to decide whether to murder them or imprison them or what. But then they're able to, the X-Men who are there, are able to escape their prison, and they are trying to take the bomb and get rid of it. The Blob is trying to stop them, and he's like, no, my body is such that I can actually absorb the blast, so I'm just going to hang on to it and make sure you don't get rid of it. in the Western U.S., at one point, I think that Don Heck didn't understand that Cyclops' beams are not lasers that burn things, but actual force blasts, because they have Iceman create a bunch of ice and then Cyclops turn it into steam. But, Roy Thomas has to put in a little thing. It's like, it's great what a little friction can do. And then the soldiers are like, it's an icy mist. So, he's trying to make this make sense. So the Angel is able to take the bomb in the Eastern European country and throw it up in the air so it blows up harmlessly. The Eastern European generals then decide to go ahead and let them go because clearly they just saved the generals. And we get to see Angel personally flying both Jean and Hank out of there under his own power. Like,
yes.
One pair of wings carrying 2 extra people from Eastern Europe to wherever they're going to be going.
And not for the first time this month, not even for the first time in this issue. Once again, you have Roy Thomas feeling the need to hang a hat on the fact that this makes no sense. And Gene is saying, even though Warren is currently doing it, but I thought you couldn't lift both Hank and me. And then Hank says, give thanks to a handy little thing called adrenaline, lass. And it's like, okay, well, first of all, you have telekinetic powers, so you could be giving him a boost. That would make more sense, Gene. But instead, they're just saying he has enough adrenaline to fly, carrying 2 people he wouldn't normally be able to carry. Like, yes, it did strike me as odd that he would be able to carry them, but not so odd that I felt you needed to explain it away in the dialogue. And then you had so much of a better explanation just right there. But then a couple of pages earlier, Bobby is saying to Scott, we made it, psych. Luckily, they didn't guard our saucer heavily.
Oh, yeah, like, right.
Once again, Roy Thomas going, this would make no sense that they would be able to get away in their saucer after they had just been prisoners. And so then you have to sort of explain, like, well, we sure are lucky. Generally speaking, whenever you ever hear us talking about how lucky they are, take it out. You don't want to have that.
Well, and how is Angel holding on to Hank? It looks like he may just be holding on to the back of his belt, because you don't really see any hands on him. And, the Mutant Master originally, remember, his headquarters had been in Eastern Europe.
Yes.
So they could just have left him in Eastern Europe and then just said, oh, I don't have far to fly these people, right? But no, they then make the point that his mobile headquarters is now somewhere in the
Midwestern United States. Yeah.
Anyway, both of the groups of X-Men are able to converge on this place because I guess that the saucers have some kind of homing beacon. They make some kind of excuse about that somewhere.
Both of the groups of X-Men are able to make it from the far-flung corners of the Earth where they are to this base in the Midwestern United States to defeat the Mutant Master. And when they arrive there, they see that both of the groups of evil mutants have also made it back to this base, who they were just fighting in these far-flung corners of the world. And they have, seemingly at the same speed, also made it back to the home base to fight them again. This makes no sense. This is definitely where I was going, like, should I just fake having read this issue? I can't stand it. I can't stand to read this issue.
Anyway, the Mutant Master ends up turning on the evil mutants, or actually, no, it's not even really clear what the heck's going on, because
it is so unclear.
Professor X shows up and starts saying, hey, here's what the real plan is. He's really going to go ahead and kill you. And the Mutant Master's like, oh no, he's going to give away my plans. And then goes ahead and turns on the evil mutants. Banshee, meanwhile, comes out, starts shrieking at the Mutant Master, and then he turns out to be some kind of alien octopus. Then he self-destructs because he's from Sirius, and Syrians aren't Syrians. That wouldn't be the right thing. People from the planet Sirius are not captured, so I'm going to go ahead and commit suicide. But then a second Professor X is there, and they're like, which one is the real one? So one of them is pointing at the other. There's a telepathic thing that says, capture the, quote, professor at whom I am pointing, Gene. He is the only true Charles Xavier, which I'm assuming is a typo, that it's supposed to say, I am the only true Charles Xavier, or he is the fake Charles Xavier. I don't know. But why did they have to have two Charles Xaviers here? Why did the one that was there earlier, who was only speaking and not using his mental powers, the bad guy or the wrong one or something?
Well, this is the Changeling. So the Changeling hasn't really gotten to use his powers yet, but they just want to show us that the Changeling has Changeling powers, which later they will be very glad that they had set up, that the Changeling has the ability to make himself look like Charles Xavier. About 20 issues from now, they'll be very glad they did that.
Okay, well, but it's still just unclear, like, why was the Changeling... I guess the Changeling had figured out that the bad guy was trying to kill them all? I don't know.
This whole thing makes no sense. Xavier starts to explain, because last issue, Thomas had called attention to the fact that it was so easy for them to get away in the Magno-Discs. So now Thomas is picking up on that this issue, going, how are Magno-Discs carelessly left there, enabling them to escape its explosion? It is because you wanted the X-Men to escape. And it's like, oh, what? Explain this more, Charles Xavier, but he doesn't. He just stops talking. This causes chaos to ensue and everybody's attacking each other. But why did he want the X-Men to escape last issue? Did he not really want the whole world to get blown up?
They did say at one point in here that if the plan didn't go through, he wanted them to be blamed for the chaos, which still doesn't make any sense. But
doesn't make any sense.
Yes. Anyway, at the end, we have one of those things where it's like, well, you evil mutants fought by our sides, and so we will let you go in peace. But when next we meet, it will be as enemies.
Of course.
Yeah, of course. So then we have just completely disconnected from any of this. They get back home, and Jean is like, oh, wait. I almost forgot. I made you all new costumes. And
yep.
They go and change into them, and their reactions are just, once again, Roy Thomas just being like, oh, man, what am I going to do with this? So, Cyclops, whose costume is the least different, he just has lost the yellow part on the top, and that's about the only difference, saying, our costumes, they're all different. Angel says, for the first time, I really look like an angel. I guess? And Iceman says, even I got new boots and gloves. Of course, you can't see anything there. And then the professor says, you've earned it. You now should be able to look like real individual human beings rather than just like soldiers.
So I gotta say, I love 4 of these 5 costumes. So this is the Scott Summers I knew and loved growing up. Even though he's got a very plain costume, they've made his costume more plain than it was before, with nothing on his chest at all. I like this costume a lot. It's very familiar to me. I like the Beast costume. I would have been happy if he'd stayed with it, with the blue and red. Bobby doesn't look that different, but he looks good. Jean with her miniskirt costume. I always like this costume. I understand why she stopped wearing it when she became Phoenix, but she does briefly go back to it on the day she dies. But I cannot stand Warren's costume. Generally speaking, I never like yellow costumes, but yellow with built-in red suspenders, can't stand it. Can't stand it. Very, very happy when Neil Adams eventually gets rid of it. How do you feel about my revulsion at just one of these?
Oh, yeah, no. Warren's costume is one of the worst design costumes in the history of comic books. It's just...
Okay, thank you.
It's just horrid. He's got yellow on his torso, sleeves, and shorty shorts, red pants and red suspenders, and red wristbands, and then black blue boots that seem to have some kind of pattern on the front of them that's unclear, and then a blue open top mask cowl thing, and it's just garish and horrible.
Yes.
The rest of them, sure, they're fine. They're decent. And yeah, I agree with you about somehow making Cyclops' costume even simpler works. And I'm not sure entirely why it works, but it definitely works. And that's why they never really changed it when they redid the new X-Men. The only thing they did was sort of change the way his goggles look, that they, sort of extended them out to where they kind of cover his ears. But that's really the only change they made.
Yep.
And there's a reason for that. It's a good costume. Hank's costume is basically black and red, and I always like that combo. At the very end, in the final panel, Angel says, cheer up, Mr. McCoy. It could have been worse. She could have helped you live up to your nickname by knitting you a nice fur outfit with a cute curly tail. It's like, oh, just you wait. You aren't going to have a tail, You are going to be a real live furry.
Yep.
Also, he's complaining about the tight sleeves, so he doesn't really like his new costume. He's just kind of trying to be polite. Yeah, and it's just, why wait until the very last page and not even have like a big old splash page with them wearing their new costumes?
Yep.
You only get to see them for one panel that takes up less than a third of the page in their new costumes, and then just a little shot in the last one, basically. Also, that's Banshee is here with them, right? They didn't really say that he was there. You just sort of see his face kind of sticking in the panel, just saying one thing. Yes, Professor, I'd be interested in hearing myself. It's like, shouldn't you have mentioned?
Is that Banshee? I can't tell that that's Banshee.
It has to be Banshee, right? I mean,
I don't think so.
Look at the thing on Banshee's head, the little headband thing earlier in the issue. I think that's supposed to be his little headband thing. Who else would it be? It's orange hair.
I guess. It's more yellowish hair in the original comic. I guess I assumed that was Warren, but...
It's colored the same color as the other panels where we see Banshee's hair. So yeah. I'm thinking that's who that is. But yeah, they don't really do much with it. Shall we move on to the backup feature?
Yes, let's move on.
Finally, we get to the backup feature, which is these days better than the lead feature. The Origins of the Uncanny X-Men, Lonely Are the Hunted. Another mutant-laden masterpiece by Stan Lee editor, Roy Thomas writer, Werner Roth artist, outstandingly inked by John Verpoorten. I think I mispronounced it last episode. I called him John Verpoorten, but there is an R in there, so it's Verpoorten. One way or the other. Dutch spelling is cursed. Outlandishly lettered by Al Kurzrock. So we saw Scott Summers in a film that we had seen earlier hiding from an angry mob. We get to see that in real life at the first page of this story. He is hopping a boxcar to try and get away. Professor X is still talking to this government agent who he's now working with to try and track down Scott Summers. They talk about an optometrist which actually probably should have been an ophthalmologist, but I'm being really super picky in that case, was talking about the weird glow in this kid's eyes, and he reported it to the government as a possible mutant.
A quick thinking optometrist or ophthalmologist who figures out, I could tell there was something weird going on. I gave him some ruby quartz glasses and I sent him on his way. And it's like, wow, all these years I figured that it was Professor Saber who dreamed up the idea of the ruby quartz glasses, but nope, it was a quick thinking optometrist.
Yep. So Scott jumps off of the boxcar in the middle of nowhere, finds a hobo camp, and they seem to be really nice to him, and they're going to give him some of his food, but then a couple of the hobos, it seems like it's only two of them, and the rest of them actually were possibly being nice to him. But they're like, hey, man, this looks like some kind of college kid. But he probably has some money. We're going to go ahead and rob him. They start attacking him. Then cops happen to show up, I think just by happenstance. Is that what you can tell?
I guess.
I don't know. Anyway, cops show up. They start trying to arrest Scott because all the rest of the hobos went and ran off. They take off his glasses and he is, shooting beams everywhere. He's trying to stop it. But then there's some kind of cabin in the woods where he's just getting some kind of a siren call. Come here, lad. Come here. And he goes into the clearly murder shed in the middle of the woods. Enter, enter. And there's some dude with just a camp lantern. Scott says, "It must be you who called me. But who are you? What do you want of me?" Says, "You have nothing to fear, boy. I called you because I sense that you, like myself, are born to rule. For I, too, am a mutant." Next ish, the first evil mutant. So I'm guessing this is Magneto here, but...
I don't think so. It doesn't look like Magneto. He's got the same philosophy as Magneto, but I don't think it's going to turn out to be Magneto, but we'll see.
So in terms of you just, were you just talking about just this being a terrible issue in terms of almost lying to me and just telling me you had read it? Or was there something else about it that was getting you down?
Nope, just terrible. Okay. That's it.
You're just like, I can't make it through this thing, man. I'm just not going to make it.
Nope. I could barely made it through.
Yes. It's not the best comics in the world.
Nope. I do like Verpoorten's inks quite a bit on the back. Really fan of this new Marvel inker who's doing quite a nice job inking Werner Roth in the back.
I think that's it. Oh, actually, I do have one closing thought. I wanted to say that your other new podcast that you've got is delightful and people should be listening to it. And I wanted to.
This is a podcast called A Good Story Well Told with Jonathan Auxier that I've been doing.
Yes.
For our first season, we've been doing the Shame Shelf, where we shame each other into reading or seeing stuff that we have never read or seen. We're having a tremendous amount of fun with it. It's been a big success, and we're very gratified.
And I want to thank your co-host, Jonathan Auxier, for defending me in one of the episodes.
Yes.
You talk about essentially taking the lead on this podcast. And he's like, I don't know, man. I think your brother is, I don't know if I'd say that about your brother. You're like, well, I usually do the intro. He's like, okay, well, that's true.
Yes. That's what we were specifically talking about, doing the intro. And I talked about how I always did the intro on my other two podcasts. No, I didn't mean to imply that you were in any way taking second place to me in this podcast.
I just wanted to say that Jonathan Auxier is now my favorite and not you.
Yes.
So based on that.
Yes. Everybody should go listen to my other podcast.
Sorry. I'm going to start up a podcast with him.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, anyway, that's it. So remember, we do have a Patreon out there. I do not yet have any kind of custom content up there. I might at some point in the near future. Patreon.marvelrereadclub.com. That's it. Thank you very much, everybody. We always love looking forward to recording these and sharing them with you. So thank you for doing your part and listening.
Yep. Okay, everybody. Thanks for coming out. This was fun. We will see you next time.
All right. Take care and stay safe out there, everybody.
Goodbye.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed it, we now have a Patreon where you can show your appreciation. If you've got a few bucks, head over to patreon.marvelrereadclub.com to support us. Also, you can still rate and review us at your podcatcher of choice, and that would be greatly appreciated as well. You can find us online at marvelrereadclub.com, as well as Facebook, Instagram, Blue Sky, and Threads. See you next time.